You know, I just try to go at it.
Now, with some books,
I feel like, look at Cormac McCarthy. I mean, there's a writer, you savor every word, but I still read his book fast.
but I think what you do is maybe the first time I read that book, I read it as fast as I could. I couldn't
Right.
I couldn't put it down.
I think you mean Blood Meridian.
Yes.
Yes.
The book.
The book.
The book. It's like fly fishermen used to refer to a river runs through it just as the movie.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen the movie? Oh yeah,
Oh,
the movie.
wow.
That was Gary Borger. Right? Like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the book. But the second time, I mean, that's the thing. Some books you want to read again because they're insane. Either the writing style or how they are constructed or something.
That's right. And like the really big books, you may want to spend a lifetime reading them.
Right. Like Moby Dick.
I think there are a lot of books that I've read numerous times, and I'll probably go back to a few more times over the years.
No, I'm trying to think of one myself right now, and I can't think of one. That's because I've read Blood Meridian too many times, and I said I would never read it again after the 12th. Boy, was I wrong.
Have you any idea how many times you might have read it?
Yeah, probably 15 now.
Wow. That's more than me. But
I know it's annoying because I don't want to read it again. I've read it, I know it. I don't want to read it again. But sometimes to prove something, I have to.
Well, especially if you're doing something like writing a paper, you really need to immerse yourself in those details. And and some books just become old friends. You want to go back to to that, visit that world again.
That is so true.
I can think of a nonfiction book that I used to read every 2 or 3 years. I don't know how many times I've read it, but
Anatomy of a Fisher or something. What is it? I want to guess it.
Oh no! I was thinking of that book by The Shape of Content by Ben Shahn.
Oh, right.
About the education of the artist. And it's a wonderful book. It's really a book that was cobbled together by some lectures that Ben Shahn had given about the education of an artist. I believe he did it at Harvard. So one of the big Ivy League universities. And it's just a marvelous document. And I went back many times to it.
Has there been a book that's locked horns with that for you on the topic? Robert, I forgot his last name. Has there been any criticism that's really been as inspiring for you?
Because most of the time, that's one of the few examples of books about art that I let into my world.
But you've read other criticism?
Sure, but I try not to. Sometimes you do it by accident, or you get into it and you realize, oh, damn it, I'll read this. But, it's important to me as a painter there's lots of different kinds. People approach art in all sorts of different sorts of ways, and all of those approaches I think are legitimate. And there'll be some painters who will take a very academic approach to art making. For me, it's been very important to not let somebody's criticism get in the way of my art making. And so I've often maybe checked out somebody's criticism, but then just said, okay, just stay away. I'm not going to let this into my world. And so I'll shut out some critics' ideas about what art ought to be, because I want to make up what art ought to be on my own. Very much like Serena Williams in the film King Richard when she's asked about, you know, who do you want to be like? And she says, I want everyone to be like me.
Right.
Right. I think she nailed what I'm thinking about that is
Mm.
I don't. And also, as an art student, in which, yeah, of course I studied some art criticism, but as an art student, I also saw how art criticism really was not good for some artists. And I'm thinking, for instance, of Clement Greenberg as a really, really
Okay.
good example.
Mhm.
And I think of the famous story of Ronald Bloor kicking Clement Greenberg out of his studio.
How to get more art in a small space. Hinges. Here we are at the 608 Art Showcase with Juarez and Vito. What we're doing, and
You know, and
not
that
being
said, I know there may be some listeners. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's okay.
There may be some listeners who are going to jump all over me for my stance there.
I hope so.
So I'm also going to say that, you know, I went to a few years ago, I went to a museum called the Dia in Beacon, New York.
Oh yeah.
Lovely, quaint little town on the Hudson River. Really interesting little place. Not far from there was Storm King, which is also the most fantastic sculpture park I've ever seen, that's for sure. But I went into the Dia and I didn't really know what to expect because it was all work from a particular tribe of artists who come from, let's say, the New York Conceptual Art School with a capital S, if you could use that word. And you could say the Dia was a dialogue between those artists. And well, I'm certainly not ignorant of that modern tradition or postmodern tradition. I'm not ignorant of that work, but it's never work that really turned my crank. But years later, I went into the Dia, and I was romanced by that work. If you could imagine that stuff romancing anyone, I was romanced by that work. So many of those pieces I saw in a new light. I think I saw in the light of the people who made them, and I was able to have a tremendous amount more empathy for that particular place and time in American art.
Well, I wonder if it's possible that you could have that experience with other retrospectives.
Of course it's possible.
So we can always change and learn.
Of course you witnessed me. I am Mr. Change and Learn. You think I'm the Mr. Stubborn guy, but I'm the Mr. Stubborn guy who turns into Mr. Change and Learn.
That's true.
Pretty quick, faced with the reality of a powerful painting.
And it's much more interesting than someone who's kind of Pollyanna, you know, when you see someone so stubborn kind of break down their shackles. And
in some cases, you know, like when I was at Dia, one of the artists featured in there was an artist named Dorothea Rockburn. And I had no way of relating to Dorothea Rockburn's work in the past. It didn't capture my imagination. in any kind of way. And I think maybe I had only seen pictures of it. When I saw her work at the DIA, all I could say is I was romanced by that work. By the time I left there, I was looking at the work. I spent a lot of time with it. And the docent who was in there came up to me and said, "You seem particularly interested in this work." And so we started to talk about it, because it turned out this person was a real fan of the work. And he started to tell me stories about how she would come into the gallery every now and then and wander through, and people would recognize her, and she would talk to them about the work. And he was talking about how fantastic that was. Anyway, all this is really just to say that, well, it isn't my favorite chunk of American art. I really did gain a new respect for it and enjoyed it far more than I ever thought I would.
I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is Candy Minx in Chicago for the Agency Podcast.
And this is Eugene Napick in Toronto, your agent in Canada.
Hi, Eugene. I'm glad to talk to you today. I feel like I was just so out of it last week that I don't remember anything about it. I was delirious.
Cool.
From my booster. Oh, there goes Steg walking by. Hi, Steg.
Well,
yeah, I didn't feel well that afternoon or the next day, so I'm glad to be back in better form. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah,
I'm pretty good. It's kind of a weird day right now, because they're filming. One of our neighbors rents out his house as often as he possibly can for commercials.
Yeah, you make a lot of money.
Yeah, and it's about 5 or 6 times a year, I think.
I think you should do that too.
Seems. Oh, I don't even want those people on our street.
I know. Can you imagine how George and with your story about Willie, can you imagine how George and Ruby would disrupt film set?
Oh, did I tell that story?
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Just a reminder to our listeners, if you're new, he had a cat that kept meowing during a production in the studio. Not in his studio, in the hallway. Guess what? I got called to George.
You did? Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that weird? I wonder if they were listening to the podcast.
Is it going to interfere with New Mexico?
No, because I filled out a form and I haven't heard back from them. Just told them who I am and all that jazz, so I don't think I'll get called.
Just before I went to Vietnam, just before the pandemic, I got a letter saying I was going into the lottery for the opportunity to be on a jury, and I assumed that I was going to get the letter saying I had to go like the day of my flight, but it never happened, and so off I went.
What happens if that happened?
I think you tell them, here's my plane tickets. You show them the plane tickets, and you say, can you defer